You're in the middle of a conversation and someone makes a point that everyone else accepts without question. You nod, you say nothing. But inside, you've already spotted the three assumptions underneath that point that nobody bothered to examine. You already see where the logic breaks. You already know the counterargument. And you make a quiet decision. Is it worth it? Is it worth unraveling all of it right now? Usually you decide it isn't, so you let it go. And you sit with the slightly uncomfortable feeling of being the only person in the room who saw what you saw. If that moment felt familiar, stay with me. Because what I'm about to walk you through isn't a list of party tricks or IQ test facts. It's a psychological portrait, 10 specific, 8 research-backed behavioral patterns that appear again and again in people with extremely high intelligence, and almost none of them look the way you'd expect. In fact, most of them look, from the outside, like problems. If you find yourself in this, subscribe. This channel is built for people who think a little differently than everyone around them. Let's start here. The first habit, and the one that causes the most daily friction, is that highly intelligent people are compulsive question askers, not out loud necessarily, inside, constantly. The question they can't stop asking is why, not why in a philosophical sense, though sometimes that too. Why in the deepest functional sense? Why does this work this way? Why does everyone accept this? Why has no one thought to question this particular assumption that the entire system is built on? Here's what's interesting. Research from the University of Michigan found that intellectual curiosity, the drive to seek out and engage with complex, ambiguous problems, is one of the strongest independent predictors of cognitive ability, separate from IQ score itself. Psychologists call it openness to experience, and it correlates directly with fluid intelligence, your ability to reason through novel problems you've never encountered before. But here's the thing. That constant internal questioning has a social cost that almost nobody talks about. When your brain is wired to automatically interrogate every claim, every assumption, every system, you find it almost impossible to switch that off in social settings. You can't just accept the premise of a conversation. You're already 2 layers underneath it, and that makes you see, from the outside, seem distant, overly critical, or difficult to please. You're not difficult. Your brain is just doing what it does best. It just won't turn off. The second habit is one that looks to almost everyone like a personality flaw. People with very high IQs tend to have an extremely high tolerance for ambiguity, but zero tolerance for oversimplification. Wild, right? Most people want answers, clear, fast, definitive answers. And the pressure in conversation, in meetings, in everyday life, is to arrive at those answers quickly. Highly intelligent people resist that pressure almost instinctively. They find premature certainty uncomfortable, not because they're indecisive, but because their brain is holding more variables than the conversation has accounted for. They have already seen what gets lost when you flatten a complex problem into a simple answer. The psychologist Elaine Aron, in her research on high sensitivity and cognitive depth, described this as depth of processing, the brain's tendency to fully elaborate on stimuli before drawing conclusions. Highly intelligent people don't just process information, they process the processing. They examine how they arrived at a conclusion, not just the conclusion itself. It makes them exceptional thinkers. And, I'll be honest with you, occasionally exhausting people to be around. The third habit is this. They reread their own thoughts. Not once, many times. They'll write something, say something, finish a sentence, and then immediately internally audit it. Was that accurate? Did I overstate that? What am I missing? Psychologists call this metacognition, thinking about your own thinking, and research consistently shows it's one of the clearest markers of high intelligence. Here's the kicker. That same metacognitive habit that makes them brilliant in complex problem-solving makes ordinary interactions mentally expensive. A text message isn't just a text message, it's a communication artifact that could be misread, misinterpreted, taken out of context. So they draft and redraft, and then sometimes don't send it at all because no version felt precise enough. To everyone else, this looks like overthinking, and sure, sometimes it is, but mostly it's a brain that genuinely cannot settle for imprecision, even in small things. The fourth habit is something that sounds like a superpower until you understand what it costs. And highly intelligent people are exceptionally good at holding opposing ideas simultaneously without needing to resolve them. They can believe that two contradictory things are both partially true. They can sit with paradox indefinitely without the anxiety that most people feel when their worldview contains a contradiction. The psychologist F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote, famously, that the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposing ideas in mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. Research since then has backed this up. Cognitive flexibility, the ability to shift between competing conceptual frameworks, is directly tied to prefrontal cortex function and correlates strongly with measured intelligence. But let's be honest about what this costs. When everyone around you is sorting the world into simple categories, good or bad, right or wrong, us or them, and you genuinely can't do that, you start to feel politically homeless, socially difficult to place, and chronically misunderstood. You are not wishy-washy. You are not uncommitted. Your brain simply cannot do the intellectual dishonesty that certainty requires. The fifth habit is the one that isolates highly intelligent people more than almost any other. They correct. Internally or externally, they almost cannot help it. A fact gets stated incorrectly and something inside them fires. A date is wrong, a statistic is misremembered, a cause and effect relationship gets inverted, and the brain flags it like an alarm. They don't always say anything. Many learn not to, but the urge is almost physiological. And here's what's actually happening neurologically. A 2019 study published in Nature Neuroscience found that high-intelligence individuals show heightened activity in the anterior cingulate cortex when they encounter inconsistencies, the part of the brain that monitors for errors and conflicts. They're not being pedantic. Their brain is literally more sensitive to being factually wrong than a lower intelligence brain is. The correction isn't a personality choice. It's a neurological reaction. The social consequence, of course, is obvious. Nobody likes to be corrected, and someone who corrects often, even gently, even accurately, gets labeled quickly. Know-it-all, arrogant, insufferable at dinner parties. None of those labels are fair. But here's the uncomfortable part. Knowing they're unfair doesn't stop the corrections. And that tension between knowing how you come across and being unable to fully change it is one of the lonelier aspects of this kind of mind. The sixth habit is one that almost nobody identifies as a sign of intelligence, because on the surface, it looks like it's opposite. Highly intelligent people tend to dramatically underestimate themselves in areas where they're most capable. Psychologists call this the Dunning-Kruger effect in reverse. The more genuinely competent you are in a field, the more aware you become of everything you don't know. The more you see the edges of your own knowledge, the more you understand how much deeper the subject goes. This is why so many extraordinarily capable people describe feeling like frauds. Not because they are frauds, but because their intelligence gives them an accurate and therefore humbling map of the landscape. Less intelligent people, by contrast, often don't see the edges of their competence at all. They feel confident precisely because they can't see what they're missing. Think about that. The very thing that makes someone exceptional in their field is the same thing that makes them feel most insecure about it. That's not a psychological problem to fix. That's intelligence working exactly as intended. The seventh habit is this. They have unusually intense, almost obsessive focus, but only on things they chose, and an almost total inability to sustain attention on things they didn't. Here's where it gets interesting. Research on what psychologists call hyperfocus, the experience of becoming so absorbed in a task that time distorts and everything else disappears, shows a strong correlation with high general intelligence. That's when the brain is genuinely engaged, it can sustain extraordinary levels of concentration. But when it isn't engaged, when the task is repetitive, beneath its capacity, or simply uninteresting, it checks out almost immediately. This creates a pattern that looks, from the outside, like inconsistency, laziness even. The person who can work on a complex problem for 12 hours without stopping, but cannot fill out a form without losing focus completely. It's not inconsistency. It's a brain with a calibrated threshold. When the threshold is met, the focus is extraordinary. When it isn't, the brain simply refuses to engage at capacity. A lot of highly intelligent people get misdiagnosed, mislabeled, or spend years believing there's something wrong with them because of this pattern. There isn't. Their brain just has standards. The eighth habit is one I want you to sit with for a moment because it's the most emotionally significant one on this list. Highly intelligent people tend to feel things more intensely than most, not in a dramatic, performative way, quietly, privately. They are often the person in the room most affected by something while appearing the most composed. Research from psychologist Kazimierz Dabrowski identified what he called psychomotor, sensual, intellectual, psychic, and imaginational overexcitabilities in intellectually gifted individuals. Put simply, their nervous system is more responsive. More input comes in, more gets processed, more gets felt. A piece of music hits differently. An injustice doesn't just bother them, it stays. A conversation that went badly doesn't fade. They're still turning it over 3 days later. This intensity is invisible from the outside. Highly intelligent people learn early to regulate, to contain, to present as calm. But inside, the volume is often significantly higher than for most people, and carrying that intensity, quietly, indefinitely, while appearing unaffected. That is exhausting in a way that's very difficult to explain to someone who doesn't experience it. The ninth habit connects directly to that intensity. Highly intelligent people tend to need significantly more time alone than the average person. Not because they are antisocial, but because social interaction requires a level of cognitive processing that, for a brain running at high capacity, is genuinely tiring in a way it isn't for others. Every conversation involves real-time analysis, reading subtext, monitoring tone, extracting what was said against what was meant, updating the model of who this person is and what they actually want from this interaction. For most people, this happens in the background. For highly intelligent people, it often happens consciously, deliberately, and continuously, which means social interaction, even enjoyable social interaction, burns through cognitive resources at a higher rate. This is why solitude for these people isn't a symptom of anything. It's recovery. It's the system restoring its own capacity. The introversion isn't a choice exactly. It's biology. And the 10th habit is the one that ties all of the others together. People with extremely high intelligence tend to feel, for most of their lives, like they are watching from a slightly different angle than everyone else. Not above, not superior, just offset. Or like there's a pane of glass between them and the natural effortlessness that other people seem to have in social, professional, and emotional situations. Psychologist Deirdre Lovicky documented this in her research on gifted adults, calling it divergent thinking combined with asynchronous development. The experience of processing the world at a level that doesn't match the social and emotional context around you. You're thinking at one speed, the room is moving at another, and the gap between them is constant. That feeling of being slightly out of phase, it isn't a flaw in you. It is the direct consequence of a mind that processes more, holds more, questions more, and feels more than the environment around it was designed to accommodate. Now, I want to say something I think is important, and I want to say it plainly. That most of what gets labeled as high intelligence in popular content is a flattering portrait. The brilliant, confident, fast-thinking person who's always right and knows it. That is not what the research shows. What the research shows is something more complicated and, honestly, more human. It's the person who questions everything, including themselves, who holds enormous cognitive capacity and still feels uncertain, who is more sensitive than they let on, more isolated than is ideal, more aware of their own limitations than almost anyone around them. The habits of highly intelligent people are not trophies. They're trade-offs. The same wiring that makes someone exceptional at understanding complex systems makes ordinary small talk feel genuinely alien. It's the same depth of processing that generates insight makes getting through a routine Tuesday more mentally expensive than it is for most people. You are not broken for any of this. You are not arrogant or cold or difficult. You are operating in a world that was largely not designed for the way your brain works. And the fact that you've gotten this far, navigating the gap between how you process reality and how the people around you do, while making it look more or less effortless. That's not a small thing. Here's what I'd like you to sit with. Not a call to action, not a self-improvement plan. Just this. The habits that have made your life harder in certain ways are the same ones that have made you capable of things most people genuinely cannot do. The two are not separable. You don't get the depth without the weight of it. And the next time you're in a room, quietly holding a thought that no one else in that room is thinking, and you make the choice about whether it's worth saying, Just know that the choice itself, that quiet calibration, is one of the most intelligent things you do. If this resonated in places you weren't expecting, you might want to watch what we did on why quiet people aren't just listening, they're processing everything differently, at a level most people never access. It's one of our most watched videos, and you'll understand why once you click it.